Welcome to Autonomy Insiders, the show where global industry leaders in autonomous driving unpack their real-world insights. Today, with Roy Uhlmann.
Obviously, the vehicles you see in the US right now driving autonomously will be not the ones coming to the European Union. They always claim, Europe is so slow, we're so bad, whatever. No, it's not true. It's actually not true. What we do is we have a proper testing process. What it means the regulator and the technical assessors are part of the whole development process. They are looking inside your systems and they're also looking inside your code. I mean, we have a situation in the US where Tesla doesn't even show or provide data about their testing kilometers and whatever, yeah? And here we even show the code. That's a totally different understanding of how to build such a system, but that's how they ensure safety.
Welcome to Autonomy Insiders. I'm your host, Daniel, and today I have a guest who is building something that almost nobody outside the German deep tech scene is talking about yet. Roy Uhlmann is the CEO and co-founder of Moat, a Berlin-based startup that claims to be the only German company developing a full level 4 autonomous driving software stack from scratch. So not an ADAS feature, not a level 2 highway assist. It's a full autonomous driver built in Berlin, funded with a recent 20 million seed round and heading for EU type approval. So Roy, welcome to the show. Happy to have you on.
Thanks a lot for inviting me.
Sure. So Roy, for our listeners who haven't heard of Moat yet, who are you, what are you building, and what's the vision?
Yeah, so we are Moto AI, 100 people. Actually founded the company 2017, so already 9 years old. Bootstrapped for quite a while and then attracted investors. You know, it's pretty difficult to attract investors in Germany. You have revenues, you have a final product, the risk is gone, but actually autonomous driving is a bit of the opposite. So it took a while to really attract investors, but then we actually hit the ground. No, left the ground. Sorry, not hit the ground, left the ground. And yeah, we built a full stack autonomous driving system, meaning no open source or something like that. Everything is developed in-house. But besides just the software, we also developed some key components which we think are crucial for the value chain when you want to really launch autonomous vehicles, which is the HD maps. So we built an engine which creates HD maps out of satellite data. So we can scale pretty fast when it comes to new driving or service areas. Second, also a drive-by-wire. So meaning we're not depending on specific vehicles already have a steer or drive-by-wire. We can actually retrofit them. And we also do the technical surveillance, which is being necessary by law, that you actually monitor the tach of a vehicle, so the AD system. And we built that as well to actually monitor and supervision a lot of vehicle over Germany and Europe.
Sounds good. And maybe let's make it concrete. So if I'm a transit authority in German district, for example, and I call Moat AI, so what exactly am I buying from you? So maybe walk us through the product and the service.
Yeah. So what we do is first of all, we think the market is splitting up. There will be a market for autonomous driving systems being deployed in OEMs, so vehicles of OEMs. So your private passenger vehicle maybe even in the near future. However, there it totally makes sense to use systems like end-to-end systems, etc., which have a crucial problem. You can't really mitigate them. You can't really ensure the safety argumentation about that, since these are black box systems. So it totally makes sense that you still have some sort of a fallback solution inside the vehicle, which is the driver. And therefore it totally makes sense to deploy these sort of technologies within passenger vehicles as a level 2++. Then on the other side, there are systems which you can really mitigate, and you can follow a safety argumentation on that, meaning when you think about the European Union and its strict safety argumentation and safety standards, and it's one of the areas which has a safety standard. In the US, it's actually a bit lower. And thinking about that, we think the market is splitting up into systems for OEMs, as a feature, autonomous driving as a feature. And the other one is then autonomous driving as a mobility service. And that's what we offer. We offer mobility service. a bit like the same like Waymo does in the US, meaning we're putting a fleet of autonomous vehicles onto public streets and we fleet them into ride hailing and on demand services. So it's not only public transport, for example, it's also the private operated fleets.
Okay, so basically you have then two customer segments, more or less public transport and also private. That's
At
correct?
the end, at the end, it's a fleet owner, or actually, it's like the one has the final contact to the end customer. And, for us, it doesn't make a difference, yeah, because the autonomous driving systems. What we think is crucial that you actually control in the early beginning the service area, because autonomous driving obviously is not that you just put a car on the street and you don't see it for the next 30,000 kilometers. You actually need to have control, like what is it doing, where is it doing what. So every millisecond you're like technical supervising it. And basically that's our differentiation between different sort of models, to be honest. And that's why we choose ride hailing on demand, since they're actually kind of like the same, it's just only a different end customer and not being the one who's providing a system for OEMs.
In your, I call it now, autonomy as a service model, who owns what? So does the customer own the vehicle or you?
To be fair, we started with a model where the customer owns the vehicle, and now we realize that it totally makes sense that maybe we own it, or to be frank, Waymo doesn't, and in the near future won't own all the vehicles anymore. Someone else will do it, like some or sort of like financing a vehicle or whatever. And I think this is a proper and like really doable framework we can apply here in the European Union, Europe as well. And we will go for that as well. So meaning we will possess the vehicle, but we might be not the owner of the vehicle in the future then.
Okay, makes sense. Maybe let's get back to the topic that you already talked about a bit. So let's talk about the architecture. So the AV industry is more or less in a fundamental debate right now. So you have modular stacks with separate perception, prediction, planning modules versus the end-to-end neural networks that you mentioned. So basically to go from sensor input straight to the driving commands. So where does Moto AI sit in this spectrum, and also why?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm going to explain a bit about the details in the technical details. So we built a modular system. So it's not an end-to-end system. Some people might think this is outdated. Actually, when it comes to safety, it's not, because we can actually prove safety layer by layer. And safety is not some sort of like that you just have some data about like driven kilometers or disengagement or something like that. Safety is actually the mitigation process about every risk and threat your system can have. And we have to ensure that we have like one failure per 100 million operating hours. And you obviously can't prove that by just driving around. So therefore, it's really crucial to build a system in different sort of layers. And then you can prove layer by layer that this failure rate exists, and that you hit it actually, or like, I mean, that you're safer than this failure rate. And when it comes to the decision making process in the vehicle, meaning like the driving maneuver, there are like sort of different sort of strategies or like technical approaches. And one of them is a classical generative AI approach. You're collecting data, you're creating new sort of situations and scenarios out of these data via simulation. And this is not what we do. So what we do is actually, in the moment we encounter a specific traffic scenario, we create a maneuver out of that based on some sort of like a world model. And let's say, determinism of that world model, meaning this helps us to really like solve the long tail at the end. And it's some sort of a system which is capable to understand when its own knowledge about a situation is not enough, meaning a car slowly approaching, for example, an intersection or something, to gather more data to make a decision that it now can drive or it cannot drive. So there's a huge advantage when it comes to the driving itself, but the much bigger advantage is actually in the costs, because you don't need actually these huge computing powers of like what we know of generative AI models. It's not some sort of like autonomous chat GPT anymore. It's like much more than that. And this also means we can leave this world, which we do know right now in autonomous driving and the obviously known chip providers, etc., and have a different sort of approach in encountering that. And At the end, this means we can drive autonomously with much, much less money to spend on data, on like simulations and so on. We still need data. We still need to simulate things. This is obvious, but not in the amount of like what you know before from autonomous driving. And this actually helped us to build such a system. So this is the big difference, to be honest.
Walk us through your sensor stack. So what's on the vehicle and why did you choose this configuration?
hmm So, I mean, we follow a classical sensor stack, a radar, LiDAR, camera, and this is specifically because that's what you need when you want to drive in the European Union. Sensors have to be redundant, so because like you have to redundantly identify objects, for example, and a camera in the dark doesn't see anything. That's like given, and you always need to ensure that like at least two sensors can detect an object, for example, and so therefore you need at least two. And since like one of them could always fail, you better have three. And this is like just the simple explanation of it. Overall, it's the sensor stack, to be frank, everyone else in the industry has when it comes to real autonomous driving, meaning like taking out the driver and not having like some supervised system or so on. And this is radar, LiDAR, camera, a classical GPU, IMU, etc.
And you also mentioned that you're not dependent on specific vehicles. So onto what the vehicle platform are you integrating your stack currently?
Well, I mean, there are some, let's say, limitations right now. The limitation is rather like a legal one. When you're having like a truck or let's say a 12-meter bus and you want to turn right, you have to really like drive into the opposing traffic. And basically this creates a problem since your autonomous vehicle is not supposed to violate the traffic regulations. So therefore, we are going to vehicles up to, let's say, about 6 meters. This makes sense. And it's a classical, at this point right now, which we are testing, is a classical V-Class. It's a van. And you can see it on Berlin streets, driving around autonomously and doing its tests. But there will be another platform then coming soon as well, which is then rather for the scaling of a fleet.
And what does it cost to equip a single vehicle with the full motor AI package, more or less, or sensors, compute, integration, everything?
Was there anyone in this podcast ever answering that question? I don't know.
No, but I still try to
Yeah,
ask it.
yeah. Yes, I think I
Someone
can't answer
someone
that.
needs to be the first one.
Yeah, no, that's totally true. Sure, this answer is really, really interesting also for me. And no, to be frank, I mean, we're still in the process to like create scaling economics, let's say it this way. So every number I would say right now wouldn't be like really reflect the reality or like the near future of like what does it really cost to have like, let's say, for example, 1,000 vehicles on the streets. I mean, I can tell you like the first test vehicle was a couple of 100,000s, but we're ways far away from that for the ones who are then finally coming on public streets in the scaling mechanism.
So we touched on the product and also the tech. I think what's also super interesting to talk about is what makes building a level 4 vehicle in Europe fundamentally different from doing it in the US or
Mhm.
China. You already teased it a bit. So Germany passed the AFGBV in 2022,
Mhm.
the world's first legal framework for level 4 vehicles on public roads. And yet, 4 years later, there are still zero type approved level 4
Yeah.
vehicles operating in Germany. So, in your opinion, why is it taking so long?
There are a couple of reasons for that, I think. I mean, to be frank, Germany and like even European Union isn't that slow. I mean, the situation is the following. In the US, you don't have let's say, the same sort of regulation for autonomous vehicles that we have here. Actually, in a couple of states, there doesn't even exist one. And China, let's say it this way, has a rather more opportunistic approach. And at the end, meaning having a legislation is what I said at the beginning, is some sort of like a safety framework. And we have a process here in the European Union which describes that. So, meaning you have a testing permission, driving around doing the tests of like every sort of like a scenario and necessity you need to prove and validate for the regulator, which is the in Germany the KBA. It's some sort of like the National Traffic Authority, something like that. And then you have also like the technical assessment companies like TÜV, like DEKRA, like others. And what they do is they're kind of like the technical arm of the KBA, and trying to ensure and first of all find out what you did with your system. And this means they are actually joining you while you're actually producing or like developing such system. It's not the way that you just like show up at the end and it's like, look at this, it's an autonomous car. Look, it can drive around the corner. It seems pretty autonomous. Give me just like sign this piece of paper. Yeah, it's not that it does work this way. Germany, I think, has and especially also Europe, has a long history in the automotive industry of making things safe. And making things safe means like we have to measure and to benchmark and to really like validate everything we're doing here. And this is like also what accounts for autonomous driving. Meaning the process to bring an autonomous vehicle onto public streets is really like showing all these different sort of layers of the system, showing that you can actually detect an object, that you can detect an object on certain weather conditions. And when you are claiming for having an autonomous vehicle driving in certain operational design domains like ODD, meaning I'm having a vehicle driving in winter, in snow, in rain, heavy storms, or like driving 100 kilometers per hour, etc., then you have to prove that you can first of all detect objects and that you are able to steer this way. And at the end, that you have redundancies in your system to really like show that and to ensure that there's always like a fallback solution, even if one system or like one part of the system fails. And this, first of all, is a huge difference to the US. So when you take a look at vehicles, for example, in the US, they don't even have like redundant drive-by-wire systems within the vehicle. They might have something which steers it, but it's not redundant. Yeah. So obviously the vehicles you see in the US right now driving autonomously will be not the ones coming to the European Union. Maybe people talk about like, in London, there's something different. I saw the same sort of vehicles they have in the US. Yeah, but London is UK. UK is not European Union. It's like totally different safety standards. They don't follow this sort of standard. And but this is like what we have here. We have these standards. We have to follow them, and you follow the process. And one part of the process is that you then have like some sort of like a testing permission driving around to test vehicles. And with this testing permission, you normally can't actually commercialize vehicle, meaning you have to test, show that to the KBA, show that to the TÜV, to the DICA, whoever it is, but you can't bring people into the vehicles. Croatia went a different way right now. Now they opened it up and said like now you can like drive around with a test vehicle and commercialize it. Yes, it's a test vehicle with which you can actually commercialize. We don't have that in Germany. But you have the same sort of thing in the US. These are not type-approved vehicles. Worldwide, there's no type-approved vehicle right now for autonomous driving. But this is like what we're doing here, and this is like the step and the final achievement we're working for is doing the type approval. And once you have the type approval, you can commercialize. In between, it's all testing. And this is like, I read a lot of things about different bloggers and whatever, and they always claim, yeah, Europe is so slow, or we're so bad, whatever. No, it's not true. It's actually not true. What we do is we have a proper testing process. We follow that. We obviously can't commercialize. When we don't commercialize, we don't put 1,000 vehicles on the streets because it doesn't make sense, because you don't make money with it. So what we do is like we put vehicles on the street in different sort of like deployment statuses, different sort of like software statuses to really test things. And basically, we take then these results of the tests and the systems, and then we show it to actually the technical assessments companies, and at the end, then to the authorities, or let's say to the regulator. And this is then the final step. But what it means is, it means the regulator and the technical assessors are part of the whole development process. They are looking inside your systems and they're also looking inside your code. I mean, we have a situation in the US where Tesla doesn't even like show or provide data about their testing kilometers and whatever, yeah. And here we even show the code. That's a totally different understanding of like how to build such a system, but that's how they ensure safety. And we're following this process. There's still some way to go. But the good thing is everyone has to follow that process. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter how good your PR is. At the end of the day, everyone needs to follow the same safety standards. And I personally think this is really good because, first of all, this creates some sort of like equal level playing field for everyone following the right technical approach. And second, it's pretty good for, at the end, the customer because we're talking about liabilities. We're talking about potential failures and accidents which could happen and shall not happen. That's basically the problem we have. And this, at the end, what we understood it and what we think it is like, is it's much easier for you to really like then operate an autonomous vehicle because you don't have to be afraid of the next legal claim or being sued by whatever if something happens, because you can really like follow your process and having a safe system and provide that to the public. And I think therefore it's pretty crucial to understand that there are different markets. The European Union is a totally different market than the US. And a lot of companies didn't even like start and try to build systems within the European Union. We did. We always build it in the way that it really like meets the EU criteria. And therefore we claim that we are right now, I think it's really like the only German full stack autonomous driving company level 4 here on the market.
It's super interesting. And so basically, you're saying um, this is not necessarily a competitive disadvantage for Europe to have these
Yeah.
regulation like type approval, but it's more like an advantage because you then afterwards have the possibility to insure the vehicle and so on.
Absolutely. It's actually this is some sort of a moat. It really at the end helps you as a company. I mean, we're doing that now for a couple of years. Some would say like, "Oh, why does it take so long?" No, it takes so long. That's the point. And these years which it took so long are actually our competitive advantage also in time, because everyone else has to follow these steps. There is no shortcut.
And I also read that your CTO, Adam Balke,
Yeah.
sat on the Dean Commission that helped shape the German autonomous driving standards. So, how much of an advantage did that give you in understanding what the final regulatory requirements would look like?
Yeah, I mean, the way you say it, it sounds like we shaped it, but it's not true, to be honest. This was like early beginning 2021, 2020, 2021. And for us, it was really important because we understood how the system looks like, the safety system, and how this legal framework will look like. And it was some sort of advantage for us because it gave us not only a hint, rather like really a direction in which we have to develop, but it's not the way that we actually actively shaped it in the way that it was in our favor or something. And in this commission, there were like sitting a lot of other companies, the big OEMs as well, but it was pretty cool for us as a small company, also some sort of like a recognition to sit at a table where the big OEMs sat as well.
So now I want to lead also the conversation to a bigger question that goes beyond just Motor AI as a company and
Ah.
touches also something political, so technological sovereignty. So
Hmm.
Motor AI calls itself, as you said, the only German company developing level 4 autonomous driving. So
Hmm.
what does it actually mean to be the only German company doing this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hurdle for others, but it can also be a burden. No, I mean, there is no real meaning for us behind that. When I'm going back in the years, and when we decided to build such a system, we learned something. And this is you can't build such a system with the automotive industry, which doesn't mean that you build it against it. It just means you're building it without it. And during all these years, we always faced a lot of problems and we had to solve them on our own. There was no specific hardware just somewhere on the shelf and we bought it and this solved it. No, we had to build a lot of things because they didn't exist. And being the only one at the end means we had to build it. There was no market for a lot of solutions which we just built. At the end, right now, that's or like it means or like led to the point that we are full stack, that we build everything in-house, that we don't have like open source software things from someone. And this would then, by the way, even create problems afterwards when you commercialize it. And it also means that we occupied, I can say it like this, some crucial points in the value chain, which we need to bring a vehicle on the street. Just as I said in the beginning, there were no HD maps. I mean, there were HD maps out there, TomTom, etc. But at the time, we needed them and we wanted to test things. The quality was a bit different when it comes to highways compared to like the last village somewhere in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern. So we had to come up with solutions for that. Same things with some hardware components, etc. So basically, It was pretty tough, but it led to the point that we had to solve it. And this is also some sort of like a culture we have in the company, like we have to solve it. There is no one there just like offering you something, solve it. And basically it's some sort of resilience you have to establish then in the company, also like in your own sort of like mindset. And this resilience led to the point that we, and I just have to say it this way, that we still exist because I mean, there were a couple of other companies, but they don't exist anymore. And we were always like short in money, to be frank. We never had like the billions, but it led to the point that we had to build a system which much less money. We are absolutely capital efficient. And right now, what we think this leads to the point that we can really like bring an autonomous vehicle on public streets with a type approval based on a financial model no one else can, because we're just so capital efficient and learned to be capital efficient in the last 9 years and like possess or like own the neuralgic points in the value chain like no other company out there. And I
Okay.
think this makes us a bit unique.
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier you raised 20 million in seed funding, I guess. And then if
Plus a
you,
bit more.
yeah, maybe plus a bit more. But for context, if you see Waymo burned through billions, Wave also just raised over a billion. So I think some would then question, is 20 million plus something more enough to reach that type approval in commercial operations, or is a Series A already being planned?
We're obviously planning the next financing round. It's always like it's always the case that when you're having a startup. However, I think when you have a lot of money, you spend a lot of money. There's obviously a certain amount of money with which you can't really like, build such a company. We were able to build it, like to I think Jan Thomas in another podcast. Time will come where we'll have also like much bigger funding rounds when you want to fund a couple of other things. Then, however, we're driving on public streets. We're driving autonomously here in Berlin on public streets. You can see our cars. So I know what we reached, and obviously there are some other steps we will have in front of us. This is obviously the type approval, and since no one has the type approval worldwide, you see that the type approval is not the question of money. It's a totally different question.
Sure, makes sense. And maybe just double clicking on the technological sovereignty theme
Hmm.
here. So let's say if Waymo or a Chinese technology provider can then deliver a safer or maybe cheaper level 4 system tomorrow, so why should a German transit authority still choose motor AI over them? Or should they still choose motor AI
You
over
mean
them?
like out of a sales perspective or like out of a sales pitch or?
Just like out of a sovereignty perspective, do you think it would
Hmm.
be necessary that
Hmm.
Germany still uses a German virtual drive instead of an US
Yeah,
or Chinese one?
I mean, to be honest, what is sovereignty? Sovereignty means being independent. I mean, we learned that the hardware in Germany, the hard way in Germany, in the last couple of months, and I would say even like 1.5 or 2 years. And independent means, well, we need to have our own technologies. We need to have our own offers. We are one of them, or like actually, we are the one in autonomous driving. Therefore, this is maybe not like really the USP for let's say, a transit provider or like a ride-hailing or on-demand provider. But at the end of the day, we're sitting here. We built for this market here. I'm not the general manager who's being flown back to his mother country if something didn't work. I go to jail, and you can really grab me. That's one of the big things I think which are important when you want to really like bring something like critical infrastructure, and autonomous driving is critical infrastructure, onto public streets. So this is not only about data, and I think a lot of companies just claim, yeah, then we have the data in Europe and so on. No, it's not what it's about. We built the system the way that a European system should be built, and the European way of understanding such a system. And to be frank, when it comes to the market right now, we see a lot of, I would say, dynamics. So there's not only the AD providers, you have like the ride-hailing companies, et cetera, et cetera. And everyone now claims to be like in the autonomous driving market and being the European autonomous driving company, wherever you want to like encounter that. At the end, it's about some crucial parts. It's like, what do you actually own and like develop in the value chain to bring an autonomous vehicle on the street? And there are a lot of pieces in there. And I think when it comes to the price, it's really important that you do know and do understand, and in most ways do occupy or like possess these parts of the value chain. Then you can really like ensure a pretty good pricing to your customers, because we're not the ones who have to earn money on HD maps. We're not the ones who have to earn money on the drive-by-wire system. We're not the ones who have to earn money on the technical surveillance, because we are the AD company. We are having like everything in one place, everything in one product. Yeah, and this is, I think, a big difference. And second, it's when you think about, let's say, 10 years in the future, and we have an understanding that a lot of vehicles will be driving autonomously, it means that there is some sort of like autonomous infrastructure and someone will manage that. And we have to ask ourselves, who shall that be? Under what kind of like values shall that be happen, or shall that happen? And basically, this is something where we think as a European company, being out of a really like European country as well, are one of like the first ones you should pick. We have the goal to bring an autonomous fleet onto public streets. We have a pretty good goal and understanding of how we want to do that, what we want to achieve on that. And I personally think one part of the business is like, first of all, developing the AD system. Second part is then the operations of the system. We see a lot of layer in the operations and a lot of layer you have to provide also like on a technical and software side to operate something like that. And we're building on a lot of things. A lot of people don't even know that, but I can't really say everything. But when it comes to an operations of an autonomous vehicle, it's as I said, it's an infrastructure. It's an infrastructure layer laying there, and we will provide that and lead to the point to really like launch AVs purpose driven for let's say on demand and ride hailing. Yeah, there are a lot of plans out there.
Right. So we've talked a lot about technology and strategy now, but as you already touched on it a bit, Moto AI isn't just planning anymore. You're actually on the road. Maybe take us through what's happening on the ground right now. So walk us through your current deployments. Where are your vehicles driving to do today? How many are out there? And is there still a safety driver in the vehicle? I assume yes.
Yeah, obviously there's a safety drive in the vehicle because we have a testing permission for that.
Yeah.
So testing permission, it's pretty simple to get an understanding of the autonomous driving market in Germany, because at the website of the KBA you can actually just get a list of like who has a testing permission. So whenever you take a look, you can just like count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and see like how many vehicles out there. So right now we have for a testing permission for our generation 1 vehicle. We're expecting the generation 2 vehicle in the next couple of weeks. We will see how fast this is. And this is not a question of the team, rather at this point a question of the authority, but they're doing good. They're doing good. And then there's like then the final sample, which we call the C sample, which will be then the generation 3 vehicle, which we plan for this year as well already and working on it. So to give a bit an answer on your question, actually, it's not really about like how many vehicles you have, rather like what you can test with the vehicle. And it's not that you're trying to drive as many kilometers as possible. We rather have the so-called autonomous vehicle capabilities, and we divided that in certain capabilities, which the vehicle has to encounter or like does encounter on public streets. And I give you, for example, one thing, or like to explain one thing right here around our office. There is a roundabout. This is nice, but above the roundabout is a huge bridge for trains. It's completely made of steel. So you don't have any GPS when you're driving with a car into the roundabout. There is no GPS anymore. So yeah, you really have to create solutions which help you even like to localize your vehicle then without GPS. And this is like only one part. Second is we have cobblestones here in front of the building. Looks so nice, but there are no lane marks, just the cobblestone. So a car might think, oh, I have like the whole street for myself. No, it's not. And you have to encounter all these things, and they have to be part of your development and part of your driving capabilities, that the car actually can localize itself right, and everything kind of like is redundant at this point. And we're testing these things layer by layer by layer, meaning it's not about like you're just driving around, so like, oh, yeah, worked. It's rather like, oh, now we're just testing this sort of, let's say, localization layer, or this sort of like detection layer or whatever. And this is what we're doing here. And I mean, what we also did is I thought it's always good to test on the customer side. So therefore, we also have contracts with public transportation systems on which we're working strongly towards to test in their areas then as well. This is going to happen the next couple of weeks and months then. You obviously always need vehicles for that. There we're also waiting for the testing permissions, and meaning at the end we are focusing at urban and suburban areas, not really highway. That's a totally different thing. So that's what we're working on, and the overall goal is really like being in the cities, being in the urban areas, plus being in the suburban areas of like Landstraßen and so on. A village is a village. Berlin at the end mostly is a village as well, but connecting these is also important for us.
And when do real passengers get in? So is there a roadmap that you look like from today?
Yeah, we have, but I wouldn't shoot it out here right now. But yeah, there is a roadmap for that.
All right. Then maybe let's zoom out a bit because Motor AI exists in a global AV market that's moving fast. And you already mentioned Waymo several times. So they did over 40 million rides last year and are heading towards a million rides per week. How do you think about the gap between where Waymo is and where Motor AI is today?
I don't even think about that, to be honest. First of all, they're on the US market. I think they have a lot of things to do in the US market. Yes, everyone is saying that they are aiming for the whole world. Well, this will take years. I not only think, I do know. We see what's going on with them right here on the German market, which is nothing. And basically, we also know what the process is to actually really like launch in Germany or like even launch in the European Union. And this really takes time. It's absolutely okay. I mean, there are a couple of companies out there. I mean, you named Waymo, but there's also like Pony and others, and then they're also aiming for these markets. So that's why I don't really think about the gap between Waymo and their amount of rides. Rather, like I see a complete landscape of autonomous driving companies. I see a complete landscape of companies who want to actually apply it. Rather think about that, to be honest, since I think there will be a bit of a question like who really makes money with it? Who really makes money in autonomous driving? And for example, when you take a look on ride-hailing companies like Uber and so on, I mean, they're pretty dynamic on now how they are encountering this market. I see a lot of fear actually right now. It's like not being too late. This is really interesting, and I think one of the more important parts, because when I take this, I would say we're not too late. We're right in the middle. We're doing our job. We have to do it safely. Don't rush. Rather, like do it as you have to do it. And then we will see what's going on with all the others. As I said a bit in the beginning, I think what's really, really important is you need to get your operations right. And the value chain, not only of like the AD system, also like of the operations afterwards is the important part. And this takes time to build up. And for example, taking a look at the ride-hailing companies, a lot of them never had an operations. So it's a completely new market for them. I'm really curious to see how they will act within this market. However, other companies in the car sharing space, also AD companies, they have much more experience right now with operating vehicles on the ground. I mean, car sharing obviously much better than AD companies since they have like less cars. But at the end, the operations of autonomous vehicles is different. And I think these are important things in the future we have to take a look at. And this will also differentiate the market a bit.
And when you look now 5 years ahead, where do you see Motor AI standing?
It's a difficult question, like it's always like, I mean, you're asking that because like I can just shoot out something really, really huge. Yeah. We're doing our job. We're doing our job pretty good, I think. That's why we are doing it for about 9 years. There will be a lot of other years in which we will really like grow and put our system on the road. So in 5 years, we have a type approved vehicle on public streets. I think in 5 years, we see, out of my perspective, a totally different market in autonomous driving than now. I think there will be a huge shift in the, let's say, businesses we see right now, how vehicles are being used, maybe also like how public transport is being used. And I'm curious to see mm, how many AD companies will then still exist, to be frank. I think, as I said, value chain is everything, and some fast successes in autonomous driving, in a lot of ways, sometimes paid just like without having a proper, let's say, standing in the value chain, and you will pay for that in the future then. Maybe it even will wash you from the market. And that's why we rather like work slowlier and having a strong footprint on all these different things in the market to have a standing then for the future.
Roy, thank you so much for being on the show today. This was a really interesting episode and was a deep dive into the part of autonomous driving world that doesn't get nearly enough attention. It was very insightful, as I said, and I'm really looking forward to have you back on the show, maybe with then the news from Motor AI that you currently not are able to talk about. But yeah, thanks again. Thank you so much for joining me today.
I thank you.